Take a close look at your bank account this month. You are likely in your 30s or 40s. You are earning the highest salary you have ever made in your entire life. You wear expensive tailored suits, drive a premium car to work, and carry a pristine business card with an elite corporate title. But every single morning, when that alarm clock rings, your chest tightens with a suffocating, invisible dread. You are completely exhausted. You sacrifice 12 to 14 hours a day, bleeding your own mental energy. Yet at the end of the month, your accounts are instantly drained by a massive mortgage, heavy car payments, and endless credit card bills. You desperately want to rest, but you are terrified to stop working for even a single day because you are only one missed paycheck away from total financial ruin. You constantly ask yourself, why did I do everything right, getting good grades, working hard, getting promoted only to feel like I am trapped inside a luxurious prison? You are suffering because you fell for the greatest financial deception of the modern world. You confused your job title with your identity, and you have willingly traded your one and only life to build a magnificent empire on another man's land. You are exactly 29 years old. The air conditioning inside the corner office of Mr. Carlson, the regional manager, hums with a sterile, freezing quiet. You sit perfectly upright in the heavy leather chair, feeling the smooth material against your neatly tailored suit. He smiles a calculated corporate smile and slides a heavy brass nameplate across the polished mahogany desk. The deeply engraved letters catch the fluorescent light. Credit Manager. Next to the nameplate, he drops a towering, intimidating stack of thick, manila folders. They hit the desk with a heavy thud, the physical manifestation of your newly acquired burdens. We need a 30% growth in loan issuances this quarter, Mr. Carlson says, leaning back and steepling his fingers together. His eyes lock onto yours, unblinking and demanding. You are the greatest asset of this bank, Leo. Your chest swells with pride. You believe him completely. You reach out and take the sleek, black access card meant only for very important persons. It feels cold and heavy in your palm. You do not see a trap laid out before you. You only see a crown, completely unaware that it is made of fragile paper. That evening, the ambient light of an exclusive downtown restaurant paints the world in a warm, deceptive gold. You sit across the table from your biological father, Mr. Mark. He is wearing his best suit, his posture radiating a lifetime of hard-working, honest fatigue. He raises a crystal glass of expensive red wine. To the elite class, he says, his voice thick with overwhelming emotion. The crystal glasses clink, a fragile, high-pitched chime that echoes over the jazz playing softly in the background. Mr. Mark leans across the white linen tablecloth, his eyes shining with the absolute certainty of his generation. Now that you have this incredibly high salary, Leo, it is time to build a real foundation. You need to buy a large house in the suburbs. Put down roots. With your new title, the bank will eagerly grant you a highly favorable interest rate on the monthly installments. It is the only safe, secure path for a long and stable career. You nod in agreement, carving into your perfectly cooked steak. You swallow his advice willingly, letting the comforting illusion of absolute safety wrap tightly around your throat like a warm, suffocating collar. You feel victorious, ready to sign whatever debt papers they place in front of you. The very next afternoon, the velvet illusion of your success shatters against the harsh, grinding reality of the industrial district. You arrive at a dilapidated, rusting warehouse that Mr. Julian has just purchased. The air here smells of damp concrete, motor oil, and heavy exhaust. Mr. Julian is standing near a mountain of wooden pallets, speaking in low, calculating tones with Arthur, his meticulous accountant. They are not talking about impressive titles or corporate prestige. They are calculating raw rental income, tracing invisible lines of profit in the thick dust. You approach them, adjusting your expensive silk tie to ward off the grime of the place. You pull out your pristine, freshly printed business card and extend it toward him. Credit Manager, you announce proudly, waiting for his validation. Mr. Julian does not even glance at the card. He does not offer a single word of congratulations. Instead, he points a calloused finger toward the far end of the loading dock. There, the warehouse manager is hauling massive wooden crates, his uniform completely soaked in dark patches of sweat, his face grimacing from the severe physical toll. "Do you see that manager over there?" Mr. Julian asks, his voice cutting cleanly through the roaring noise of the nearby highway. He is an incredibly skilled man. He is dedicated and works tirelessly every single day. But every drop of sweat he sheds is simply generating the cash flow needed to pay off the mortgage on this land for me. Mr. Julian finally turns his sharp, unyielding gaze toward you. When you put on your suit and walk into that towering glass bank tomorrow morning, ask yourself a very simple question, Leo. Are you me, The man who owns the ground? Or are you that sweating manager, trading his life to buy the land for someone else? The question hangs in the heavy, suffocating air. You look down at the prestigious business card resting in your palm. Suddenly, the weight of it vanishes. It feels exactly like what it truly is: a worthless, empty piece of paper. You are exactly 32 years old. The heavy, soundproof glass door of your pristine corner office swings open, admitting a man who clearly does not belong in this sterile temple of polished marble and tailored wool. His name is Chris. He is a local real estate investor, arriving to apply for a massive commercial loan. You look at him from across the vast expanse of your heavy oak desk, your eyes silently raking over his faded cotton t-shirt, the frayed seams of his denim jeans, and the worn-out soles of his scuffed leather shoes. You lean back in your ergonomic leather chair, adjusting your expensive silk tie with the quiet, arrogant half-contempt of a chief executive officer. You feel a deep, comforting sense of absolute superiority. You believe you are the powerful gatekeeper of the vault. You assume he is merely a beggar asking for the keys. You slowly slide his financial dossier toward you, fully expecting to see the chaotic, desperate numbers of a struggling amateur. You casually open the thick manila file. You trace your perfectly manicured finger down the neatly printed columns of his personal balance sheet, and then your breathing simply stops. The ambient, freezing hum of the air conditioning fades into a sharp, ringing silence inside your ears. You blink repeatedly, staring blindly at the dark ink on the page, desperately hoping it is a typographical error. It is not. The numbers stare back at you with a cold, indifferent violence. Chris's passive monthly cash flow, the silent money that flows continuously into his bank accounts while he sleeps, while he walks around the city in those battered old shoes, is exactly 10 times larger than your entire annual salary. The same salary you sacrifice 80 hours a week to desperately earn. A single, freezing drop of sweat traces the line of your spine. You suddenly realize the horrifying, unspoken truth hidden deep within this transaction. Chris is not a beggar. He is a master player. He is sitting casually across from you, using your bank's money, the very institution that chains you to a desk, to systematically purchase income-producing properties entirely for himself. He is buying his total freedom using the exact same financial system that you serve as an obedient, well-dressed slave. The transparent glass walls of your office suddenly feel incredibly close, trapping you like a beautiful, suffocating terrarium. The bitter, metallic aftertaste of that realization lingers violently in your mouth until the weekend. You stand on the perfectly manicured, emerald green grass of an exclusive golf course, surrounded by the gentle rustle of wind moving through the ancient pine trees. You are here with Mr. Julian and your childhood friend, Mike. The morning sun is shining brightly, but your chest feels remarkably tight. You grip the rubber handle of your expensive titanium golf club, your knuckles turning completely white. You cannot stop talking about Chris. You speak with a sharp, defensive annoyance. You loudly suggest that Chris is nothing more than a lucky amateur who blindly stumbled into a favorable housing market. You bitterly boast about your own superior financial expertise, your prestigious university degrees, and your flawless ability to analyze complex credit risk models. You are desperately trying to rebuild the fragile paper crown that Chris's balance sheet had so effortlessly crushed. Mr. Julian does not say a single word. He simply stands there, quietly listening to your frantic, insecure justifications. Then, he slowly lowers his golf club, resting the metal head against the soft, damp grass. He looks at you with a heavy, piercing calmness. "Let me tell you a story," Mr. Julian says, his deep voice cutting cleanly through the quiet air. Many years ago, Ray Kroc, the man who built the McDonald's empire into a global titan, gave a guest lecture to a Master of Business Administration class at the University of Texas. After his speech, he looked at the room full of elite, highly educated students and asked them a very simple question. "What business am I in?" Mr. Julian pauses, letting the heavy silence stretch between the three of you. The entire classroom erupted into loud, patronizing laughter. They thought he was making a joke. One of the arrogant students shouted back, "Everyone knows you sell hamburgers, Ray," but Ray Kroc did not laugh. He looked at them with absolute, terrifying seriousness and quietly replied, "I am not in the hamburger business. I am in the real estate business." You stand frozen on the fairway, the warm breeze suddenly feeling incredibly cold against your skin. Mr. Julian steps closer to you, his dark eyes locking onto yours. The absolute, unyielding logic of his next words lands like a physical blow to your ribcage. Your deep financial knowledge, your ability to approve loans, your perfectly tailored suits, all of that is merely your expertise, Leo. That is just you standing over a hot stove, grilling hamburgers with exceptional skill. and you are blindly using every single ounce of that brilliant expertise to help Mr. Carlson and the bank acquire more real estate and more wealth. He turns his back to you, silently preparing to take his next swing. You are 32 years old, Leo. You are expertly managing millions of dollars every single day, yet you do not own a single piece of your own land. You do not have any business of your own. You are exactly 35 years old. The dark, heavy bags beneath your eyes have become a permanent fixture on your face, painted by the exhausting reality of 14-hour workdays. You leave your towering glass office building long after the sun has set, stepping out into the cold, indifferent city streets with a profound, aching emptiness in your chest. You are trading the absolute best, most vibrant years of your human existence for digital numbers on a payroll screen. The psychological pressure of managing multi-million-dollar credit portfolios for Mr. Carlson is slowly crushing your spine. To desperately compensate for this suffocating internal pressure, your exhausted mind demands a psychological release. You decide that you deserve to reward yourself. You convince yourself that you have finally earned the right to taste the beautiful fruits of your relentless, grinding labor. You step into the blindingly bright, pristine showroom of a luxury European automotive dealership. The intoxicating scent of expensive, hand-stitched leather and premium chemical polish fills your lungs, acting as a powerful anesthetic against your corporate fatigue. You sit across from a smiling salesman and take a heavy metallic pen into your hand. Without a second of hesitation, you sign the towering stack of installment papers to purchase a magnificent, midnight black Mercedes-Benz. Shortly after, following the incredibly proud, traditional advice of your father, Mr. Mark, you sign another mountain of legal documents. This time, you secure a massive 30-year mortgage for a sprawling, beautifully manicured suburban villa. Mr. Mark had placed a warm hand on your shoulder, telling you that a large home is the ultimate symbol of a successful, settled man. You believe him completely. A few weeks later, you sit across from a junior loan officer inside your own bank to update your personal financial profile. You confidently slide your newly updated asset statement across the polished mahogany table. The officer reviews the document, their eyes widening with genuine, manufactured respect. They look at the staggering, inflated market valuation of your new suburban villa. They see the premium sticker price of your luxury European vehicle. They smile, a bright, artificial smile, and eagerly praise you for accumulating such a massive total asset portfolio. In their eyes, and in the deeply flawed eyes of the traditional financial system, you are an incredibly wealthy man. Walking out of that bank, listening to the expensive purr of your Mercedes engine, you feel like an absolute king. You do not realize that your beautiful crown is actually a spiked, heavy iron collar. The intoxicating illusion of your wealth begins to fracture violently just a few months later. You agree to meet your childhood friend Mike for a mid-morning coffee at a quiet, unassuming sidewalk cafe. You arrive in your gleaming black luxury car, wearing a perfectly tailored wool suit that projects total dominance. Mike arrives a few minutes later, wearing a simple, faded cotton polo shirt and comfortable walking shoes. He does not carry the tense, vibrating aura of corporate anxiety that completely surrounds you. He looks utterly, terrifyingly free. As you both sit beneath the canvas awning of the cafe, sipping bitter dark roast coffee, Mike casually opens his battered, silver laptop. You lean over, expecting to see a traditional corporate spreadsheet. Instead, Mike shows you the inner workings of his personal cash flow. The numbers glowing on the screen represent a totally different universe of financial reality. Mike explains the cold, beautiful mechanics of his latest financial maneuver. He recently walked into a bank and took out a strategic mortgage against a fully occupied, cash-flowing apartment building that he already owned. However, he did not use that newly acquired capital to buy a luxury vehicle or a dead suburban mansion. Instead, he used that borrowed money to purchase a fully automated commercial car wash system on the busy edge of town. I do not stand out in the sun and scrub the cars, Leo, Mike says, his voice perfectly calm over the ambient noise of the passing street traffic. I do not operate the machinery. I do not deal with the customers. I simply own the automated system. The system runs 24 hours a day, generating raw cash, which pays off the bank loan and drops the remaining profit directly into my personal accounts. You stare blankly at his glowing laptop screen. A sudden, freezing sensation drops into the bottom of your stomach. Your breathing turns shallow and rapid. You slowly lower your gaze and look down at your own left wrist. The heavy, glittering gold Rolex watch strapped to your arm suddenly feels like a burning handcuff. You vividly remember the humiliating reality of how you acquired it. You bought it using a high-interest cash advance from your premium credit card. You look across the street at your midnight black Mercedes-Benz. It is sitting perfectly still, yet you know it is silently, violently devouring your bank account, demanding exorbitant monthly insurance premiums, premium fuel costs, and suffering staggering daily depreciation. The horrifying truth crashes down upon your chest, stealing the oxygen straight from your lungs. Mike's assets put money into his pocket while he sits at a cafe drinking coffee. Your so-called assets take money directly out of your pocket every single time you blink. In that terrifying moment of absolute clarity, you realize the darkest secret of your prestigious corporate existence. You realize that you do not dare argue with Mr. Carlson ever again. You can never raise your voice, you can never refuse an unreasonable demand, and you can never walk away from the grueling 14-hour workdays. Because if you lose your executive salary for even one single month, the crushing weight of your luxury car payments, your suburban villa mortgage, and your credit card debt will instantly push you into total, catastrophic bankruptcy. You are not a king ruling an empire. You are a highly paid, perfectly dressed hostage. You have systematically locked yourself inside a beautiful, inescapable prison, and you have willingly handed the only key directly to your boss. You are exactly 40 years old. The calendar turns, but there is no time for celebration, because a massive, brutal financial crisis has just erupted, sweeping across the globe like a silent, invisible plague. The towering glass building where you have sacrificed your youth suddenly feels less like a fortress and more like a sinking ship. Toxic rumors begin to bleed through the air vents and slither across the sterile cubicles. Your bank is going to be ruthlessly acquired and dismantled by a much larger, faceless international corporation. The psychological atmosphere inside the office becomes utterly stifling. It smells of stale, burned coffee and the sharp, metallic scent of human fear. The unspoken rules of survival have suddenly changed. Your colleagues, the same people who used to leave the building at 5 o'clock, are now arriving hours earlier and staying long into the dead of night. The rhythmic, frantic clicking of their keyboards sounds like a swarm of desperate insects trying to escape a fire. You do exactly the same. You sit beneath the harsh fluorescent lights until your eyes burn and your vision blurs, desperately compiling massive, complex risk reports. You are working yourself to the absolute bone, hoping beyond hope to prove your indispensable core value to a phantom board of directors you have never even met. You still blindly believe that your 15 years of unwavering loyalty will act as a permanent shield. The illusion officially ends on a quiet, overcast Monday morning. You walk through the polished marble lobby, your heavy leather shoes clicking with an exhausted rhythm. You approach the secure glass doors of the executive suite, pulling out your sleek, black access card. You press it against the electronic scanner. Instead of the familiar, comforting green chime, the machine emits a harsh, flat beep. The light flashes a violent, undeniable red. The heavy glass doors remain firmly locked. A security guard quietly steps forward, avoiding eye contact, and escorts you down the long hallway to the Human Resources Department. You walk into the freezing room, fully expecting to see Mr. Carlson, your regional manager, the man who handed you your paper crown all those years ago. But his heavy leather chair is entirely empty. You soon learn that Mr. Carlson was quietly terminated the previous week, discarded just as easily as an expired ink cartridge. Sitting across the desk is a completely unfamiliar human resources manager. She wears a stiff gray suit and a perfectly blank, rehearsed expression. She does not know about the late nights you worked. She does not care about the millions of dollars in revenue your credit campaigns generated for the corporate vault. Without a single trace of human emotion, she slides a thin manila folder across the desk. Inside is your formal dismissal notice, accompanied by a pathetic 2 months of severance pay. 15 entire years of your blood, your relentless stress, your completely consumed youth, all of it is wiped out of existence by a single, careless signature from a total stranger. The velvet trap has finally sprung shut. The execution is entirely silent. An hour later, you stand completely numb inside your corner office, folding a cheap, cardboard box. The harsh, tearing sound of the packing tape echoes loudly in the empty room as you slowly place your brass nameplate into the bottom of the box. Your hands are visibly trembling. Seeking a desperate lifeline, you pull out your cellular telephone and call your father, Mr. Mark. When you tell him the devastating news, the absolute silence on the other end of the line is deafening. Then, the terrible panic sets in. His voice, normally so full of confident, traditional wisdom, becomes thin and frantic. He urgently tells you not to panic, to immediately print out your resume, to use your personal savings to hold out, and to go beg another bank for an executive position by tomorrow morning. He is begging you to simply find another master to serve. You hang up the telephone. A cold, nauseating sweat breaks out across your forehead. With trembling fingers, you open your personal banking application to look at your liquid savings account. The numbers glowing on the digital screen are a devastating joke. You stare at the pathetic sum, doing the brutal, unforgiving math in your head. Your savings will not even cover the massive interest payments on your sprawling suburban mansion and your luxury Mercedes-Benz for the next 3 months. The terrifying reality of your financial existence finally crushes your chest, making it entirely impossible to breathe. You do not own those beautiful, luxurious things. They own you. They are not assets. They are starved, vicious predators, and without the steady stream of your corporate salary to feed them every single month, they are going directly for your throat. The debt collectors are already lining up in the shadows. You have spent your entire adult life feeding the wealth of a faceless corporate system, leaving yourself completely exposed, bleeding, and utterly alone in the dark. You step through the heavy, revolving glass doors of the towering financial institution for the absolute last time. The cardboard box in your arms feels incredibly heavy, packed with useless plastic trinkets and a brass nameplate that no longer holds a single ounce of power. You step out onto the cold, unforgiving concrete of the bustling city sidewalk. The freezing wind bites at your face, but you do not rush to find a taxi. You simply walk in a heavy, suffocating daze until you reach a crowded, noisy intersection. You stop at the corner, standing completely still as you wait for the pedestrian signal to change. Across the busy street, glowing brightly against the gray, overcast sky, you see the unmistakable golden arches of a McDonald's restaurant. You stare through the massive, grease-stained windows. You watch the exhausted employees dressed in cheap uniforms, frantically rushing back and forth under the harsh fluorescent lights, flipping sizzling beef patties on hot iron grills. Just days ago, you would have looked at them with quiet, arrogant pity. But today, standing on the pavement as a discarded, unemployed hostage, the grand corporate illusion is completely shattered. You realize that you and those exhausted fast food workers are exactly the same. For 15 long years, you were simply flipping multi-million-dollar credit portfolios instead of cheap beef. You were never a king building an empire. You were merely the highest-paid butcher in the entire building. You slowly lower your gaze. You stop looking at the frantic employees. You stop looking at the glowing menu boards and the sizzling meat. Instead, your eyes drop down to the solid tiled floor inside the restaurant, and then further down to the cracked asphalt beneath your own leather shoes. You look at the prime, fiercely contested plot of commercial land that the entire building occupies. The booming voice of Mr. Julian echoes clearly in your mind. The real wealth is not the hamburger. The real wealth is the unyielding ground it sits upon. You return to your sprawling suburban mansion, but it no longer feels like a sanctuary. It feels exactly like a perfectly decorated mausoleum. It is time to stop the bleeding. The very next morning, you take the first brutal, agonizing step toward actual freedom. You drive your midnight black Mercedes-Benz back to the luxury dealership and sell it back to them at a staggering, sickening financial loss. You willingly swallow the painful humiliation to completely amputate the toxic, cash-draining liability from your life. You do not stop there. You pack up your expensive tailored suits and move completely out of the massive suburban villa. You immediately rent the sprawling property out to a wealthy corporate director, using their monthly rental checks to perfectly cover your suffocating mortgage payments. The massive concrete anchor is finally unchained from your drowning neck. A week later, you are sitting in the dim, cramped kitchen of a small, cheap, rented apartment on the edge of the city. There is no polished mahogany desk here. There is no air-conditioned corner office. You are sitting at a chipped, cheap pine dining table, surrounded by absolute, uninterrupted silence. You open your laptop computer, but you do not open a word processor to update your executive resume. You are completely finished begging other men for a paper crown. You firmly close the laptop and push it away. You take a single, blank piece of white printer paper and a cheap plastic pen. With a steady, determined hand, you draw a single horizontal line across the top of the page, followed by a long vertical line straight down the middle. A simple, unforgiving letter T. On the left side, you write the word liabilities, the relentless predators that take money out of your pocket. On the right side, you write the word assets, the silent, working systems that bring money in. You reach into your pocket and pull out a crisp, single $100 bill, a tiny fraction of the salvaged cash from the humiliating sale of your luxury car. You lay the green paper flat against the rough pine wood. You do not look at it as a piece of paper to buy a fancy dinner or a designer watch. For the very first time in your entire 40 years of existence, you look at that $100 bill and you see a soldier. It is a quiet, ruthless worker, standing at attention, waiting for your absolute command. The terrible, exhausting race of the employee is finally over. The quiet, solitary journey to finding your own plot of land has just begun.